Hello, and thank you for joining me once again. First off, an apology. I am so sorry it has taken so long to get another video up. Good news, the wedding reception went absolutely wonderfully, and I finally have a little bit more free time on my hands. So, yay, we're getting back to videos. Other news, I am in this video actually using somebody else's pattern. I purchased a DGRequiem pattern and they're fantastic. Third bit of news is that I'm trying something a little different with video editing and, not so much voiceover and maybe a little bit more actually talking while I'm doing stuff. We'll see how it goes. So without further ado, here we go. So today we're going to sew a pattern created by DGRequiem. I've got it already cut out, and you will notice I did pink the edges. I've been kind of experimenting with it a little bit. On places where I knew I needed a lot of precision, I did cut it with straight scissors, and I have added fray check. These are fray checked as well. These are just fray checked because I realized I needed two. This one is not patterned because I didn't want to cut back into my I love this pattern. Is this not so adorable? I didn't want to cut another one of these pieces out because it was just so tiny and it would just seem like such a waste and throw everything off for the next time I want to use it for a project. So I just used some muslin, and that'll just go on the inside of the neck. It'll be fine. We've got our sleeves, we've got our sleeve cuffs. I've noticed with her patterns she tends to add loads of poof, which I think is cool and is going to be a neat touch and something I don't usually do for myself. And yeah, I'm pretty excited. I'm going to link the pattern down below. It is for the Saber school pattern. So it comes with a cute little skirt too that we aren't going to do today, but we're going to do the blouse. So first thing I did was mark all of the darts from the pattern pieces onto my fabric and then sew them. And that's what you see me doing here. There's quite a few of them actually, 6 darts in total, which I guess is kind of my standard for when I do patterns too. So we're going to skip past a few of them. So now we're going to do what was her first step. It's going to be my second step, and that is sewing the shoulder seams. She does recommend reinforcing them, which I think is an excellent idea, so I will top stitch over them with the seam allowance facing back to the back of the shirt, and we'll be right back. I apparently lost the footage of doing the shoulder seams together and I only have top stitching footage, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You've seen me do that before. So what I'm going to do is run gathering stitches over all 4 of those seams, and then we will gather them where they need to go. So when I do my gathers, I do a longer stitch length than when I'm just sewing a seam, but I don't go for the longest stitch length like I would with human size clothes. For dolls, I usually go around 3.5, 4 out of 5, and I have found it just tends to make the gathers a little bit easier to manage and a little bit more even. Alright, I think I am going to put these into the sleeve cap first. And these particular sleeves did not have a front and a back. They are symmetrical. So as long as you make absolutely sure that you've got right sides facing, you're good to go. I do like to, when they're symmetrical especially, find the center of the sleeve cap and line that up with hers. Anyway, sometimes I'll make sleeves and I don't know what I do, but like one will end up being way shorter than the other. Like usually the front is way shorter than the back, and that's probably wrong. Hers are nice and like they're pretty even, so we're gonna put the center right there on that shoulder seam. And then this gets to go right here. I keep my little dart facing downwards. I just think it's the most manageable that way. And no, actually that was how I was taught. Your darts go either down or to center back. So then we've got this piece, line that up, and then we get to pull on our little gather threads. Well, one of them. Come in! So that was my husband entering the room, and while I sit and chat with him while doing gathers, I figured I could speed this up a little bit. It's something we've seen a few times, and it doesn't change a whole lot. It's mostly just fiddly work where you try to get it all looking nice and even. Okay. Now to sew all the seams. So I'm gonna sew all the seams at this point, but I think I only show this one, and just for reference, this clip has been speeded up by 400%, and it still looks like I'm going excruciatingly slow, and that is because there's gathers in the arm side, so take your time with that stuff. Alright, so I ironed that so that we can fold this over, cover up all those raw edges, and we're gonna top stitch about 1/4 of an inch away from this seam. Why 1/4 of an, or not 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch away from this seam? A little tiny bit. Why not stitch in the ditch? Well, you can. That's an option. I tend to like the look better of just a discreet little top stitch, especially when I have thread that matches the fabric, and I do. So that's how we're gonna do it. Also, that is how it is in the instructions. Yeah, sometimes stitching in the ditch is nice if you really want it to be completely invisible. It's also kind of a pain to do, if I'm being totally honest. Okay, so we're gonna go sew those guys, and then in the meantime, we're gonna also start on the collar piece. Now this guy, yes, so right sides together, we are going to pin this. And now, if I'm understanding the pattern correctly, I believe that this end here is that shape specifically because you're expected to sew all the way there, bounce off it, and then come back. And then when you turn it inside out, you've basically got a pre-clipped edge. I think. Don't quote me on that. But that's what we're going to try to do, because these edges are fray checked, so they're pretty sturdy, and I think we can get away with it alright. Okay, so this turned out great. Looks quite nice, I think. Definitely digging the top stitch style, and this looks all nice and neat now on the inside, just the one pinked edge. This side turned out great, doing it that way. This side, I had to go back and do it from the other side because there was just the tiniest bit, like 1/8 of an inch of overlap. And then when I tried to turn them inside out again, it still didn't work. There's just way too much fabric around that point. So we're trimming those down, like a lot. Because we want our collar points to be, you know, pointy. And we're going to try again. What am I using to do it today? This is just a white watercolor pencil. I figure it's not going to hurt to have a little bit of that on the inside, and I like how sturdy the pencils are for poking through. Oh, before we do that though, let's also just do, you know, a few cursory snips of this edge, since it is curved just a little bit. So the other reason I think this is being a bit of a pill is that the edges did get a little bit stiffer because of that fabric check or fray check I was just bragging about earlier. So I'm not 100% convinced this is my favorite method.
Okay, so despite how annoyed I sounded just there, it actually turned out just fine. Like, once I ironed it, the corners were perfectly flat. Now what we're doing is sandwiching the collar top between the two collar neck pieces. And this is a little bit tricky. You can baste down the collar top to one side of the neck piece, but I did not do that. I just used an awful lot of pins.
Okay, so just to clarify, we're starting here and we're going to sew, making sure that we miss the collar piece up until we turn, and then we purposely catch the collar piece all the way down until we turn again, and then we purposely miss it going down this edge. Sounds good. Alright, so that's sewn. And I realized as I sat down to sew that I was going to want to leave these off by like 1/4 of an inch. The reason is because once we pop this right side out, and we'll make that nice in a sec here, but once this is popped right side out, we want to be able to sew this to the collar and then flop this over and cover the top to make it look nice.
So, first thing I do is just trim the corners and then iron down both sides so that they lay nice. It is a curved edge, so it's a little weird. There, you see it's ironed. So you gotta iron it carefully. But then on the shirt, we're finding the center, and then we're finding the center of just the outside piece of the neck collar. After that, we carefully pin it along the edge of the shirt, and It doesn't go all the way to the end. That is okay, that is by design. And you do want to make sure that those ends are even though. So then we sew it down. And you want to just make sure that the collar isn't accidentally getting caught up in there, the pieces that, you know, you don't want to sew over. It's kind of easy to do on the collar.
Alright, so for some reason I had to go back and sew again because my stitches just veered way too close to the edge there. And so I went back and stitched a more appropriate distance away.
Okay, so this is why I decided to have just that little 1/4 of an inch of the side collar I left unsewn, is so that I had that freedom to flip that edge over and use it to cover up all the ugly seams on the inside of the neck collar piece now. It's just kind of sandwiching everything up in there and making it look like a neat little package. I did have to clip the lapel so that I could wrap that around and get that nicely covered. And normally you don't do that with a human size pattern. You would have a front facing. This pattern does not have a front facing, because with dolls you want to kind of keep off as much of the bulk as you can. And for this one, I did decide to stitch in the ditch because I didn't have any other top stitching on the collar and I didn't really want to add it, so I decided to try to add an invisible stitch.
Alright, so I stitched in the ditch and it actually turned out pretty alright. You can barely see it, which is the goal. The only place it came over, it's a little bit right there, and honestly that's not enough to fuss about, so I'm going to leave it. And now I believe we stitch the side seams together actually. And this so get your side seams all stitched. And then we will be able to try it on and see exactly what we want to do with the front. Because I still don't know how this is going to sit on the doll. I actually have never made this pattern before, so should be interesting.
And we just throw that under the machine. Especially with cotton fabrics like this one, where it's just basically a quilting fabric, I don't use a lot of pins. I do always like to try to pin underneath the arms though to make sure that the seams line up. Highly recommend it. Even if that's the only pin you use, it's usually worth it. I'll also do the edges though for the same reason. Otherwise sometimes they drift more than I like.
Okay, so it's fitting time, and apologies for the headless handlessness of my poor doll. Her head is currently in Canada and her hands have stains, so they're getting stain treatment. But that's okay, all she needs is a torso for this fitting. So what I did basically was folded these edges over a little bit more than I expected I would need to actually, but that's okay because it gives us like a comfortable little bit of leeway there. So I then pulled it across to see, and it fits quite nicely actually. Like, look at that excellent fit.
So now that we have an idea of what we're doing, I take it off the doll and using those pins, just pin it down in a way that's easy to go through the machine because I want to keep that line exactly where it is. And with this pattern, you want to keep right and left sides fairly even. That'll keep it even when it wraps across the doll's chest. And of course I have to fiddle with it. And under the machine it goes for a nice top stitch to hold everything in place. I did the top stitch a little bit under a 1/4 inch away, mostly because I wanted to hold as much of that flap down as possible without looking odd, and I think it worked out pretty good.
So I know I've talked a lot about ironing, and here you can see, you know, an ironed seam, and it ends up looking so much nicer from the front. Oh, if you do it right. Apparently I didn't do this one right. I'll have to redo it. Here, how about this one? Yeah, this one's way better. So, it still has that issue. Gross. Well, anyway, my point is, how, you might be asking, do you iron that without iron a big giant crease in the whole thing? Well, for human shirts, you use a tailor's sausage. This is not going to work for this shirt. So I made a tailor's noodle. I couldn't decide if I should call it a tailor's noodle or a tailor's Slim Jim, because in theory it should probably be, you know, some kind of meat-based product, because you've got your sausage and you've got your ham. So, you know, Slim Jim, but Taylor's Slim Jim just doesn't really ring off, you know, doesn't really roll off the tongue. Noodle, however, does, and it's a funny word. Well, anyway, all this thing is muslin that I stuffed with muslin scraps from my many, many attempts at drafting. And yeah, it works really good. You stuff it in there and it gives you something to iron against. So I highly recommend, if you plan to make a lot of doll clothes, especially in the 1/3 size, because this really becomes an issue at 1/3 size. You can kind of squeak by with the smaller sizes, but honestly, iron whenever you can, because even in smaller sizes you can see it. Anyway, they're very handy, and that's what I do. And I have to go and redo these underarms because apparently I just blew that.
Now is also a good time to hem the bottom as well. I basically just folded it up a scant 1/4 inch and ironed the snot out of it and then ran it through the machine.
Alright, so I have sewn the snaps off camera because I have found that if I sew them on camera, I need to remake them every time. And I really don't like doing snaps, so I figured I'd do them once and do it right. And that's what I did. So we have Suzumi here. She still does not have her permanent head, so here is her temporary head. And I honestly think that shirt looks amazing. Very fun design. I really enjoy it.
So this one was a unmitigated success. I'm super happy with it. It pairs awesome with jeans. It pairs awesome with the skirt. Yeah, if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.